This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment podcast brought to you by Hoxo Media. And I'm so excited to introduce to our listeners and audience today a lady who I think we should all be following because she's transforming the world for so many people. This is Jane Hatton, and we were actually introduced through my Recruitment Shining Stars show with Ian Knowlton. You were a guest in our very early days in 2020, and that episode has resonated with me ever since, and I'm so proud that you're on our show today. Welcome to you today, Jane. How are you?
Thank you, Lisha. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm a bit warm, but I'm very, very well, thank you, and absolutely delighted to be here.
Good. Well, we're not going to complain about the fact that we're warm because obviously it's nice that we're in that position. It's very nice. I was going to say I look like I'm dressed for winter, but it's just because it's very cool in my house. Well, for those who are not yet familiar with who you are, and they certainly will be when they've listened to this episode, would you like to explain about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I think my claim to fame is that I founded a social enterprise 10 years ago this month. It's our birthday this month.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Which is all about employing disabled people. So we have kind of three different elements to what we do. The core of it is a specialist job board. So it's where inclusive employers can find talented disabled candidates. And similarly, those candidates can find those organisations that are truly inclusive. And then either side of that, we help employers to become more inclusive and accessible. And very, very recently, we've had a new service which actually helps disabled candidates who are looking for work to navigate around some of the barriers that come across them. But I think, my guiding values are all about lived experience. So everybody at Evenbreak, we're all disabled ourselves, and we're very diverse in lots of other ways, ethnicity and gender and personality and all the rest of it. But for me, it's about learning from lived experience and those values, and also which I can talk about in a moment if you want me to, the social model of disability, which is, there's nothing wrong with disabled people. We tend to talk about fixing disabled people, but most of us can't be fixed, and many of us don't want to be fixed because that means we're not acceptable as we are, and actually we are acceptable as we are. So the social model really looks at the barriers that are there in place to stop disabled people participating in employment or in any other part of life, really. So what we're about is learning from lived experience and removing disabling barriers, particularly from the recruitment process.
Oh God, it's absolutely, it's wonderful. And I'm really pleased that that's your starting point, actually, because I just think from a general point of view, we all put barriers in place, whether we're recruiting accountants, whether we're recruiting recruiters, which is what I do. And that's a mindset that I've always looked to shift. I think that it's something that we're all very mindful of doing. And I think the reason I wanted to get you on, I think, during 2021 is, the world rebuilds, and we look at, the fact that most markets are talent short. Brexit's had a massive impact in sort of blue collar recruitment, and then white collar recruitment is always going to be talent short. Is that we need to remove barriers, and we need to think inclusively, but not just having it as a badge exercise that, we are a diverse employer. Well, actually, what does that mean? And it's all the things that you talked about there. So you've been doing this, like you say, happy birthday, June 2021. Did you say you're 10 or 20?
10, yeah.
10 years old.
2011 we started, yeah.
I hope you're going to celebrate in some way, hopefully.
Certainly, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure we're sharing all that on social media. So, yeah, I mean, you've definitely contextualised it. So in terms of your own personal experience then, obviously, I love the fact that you're sort of the sort of the living, breathing example of what it truly means to understand what it means to be a disabled person. So your story, and I don't know how much you're happy to share, but you weren't always disabled, were you?
No, I mean, it's one of those kind of ironic stories, really. So I've always been interested in equality, apparently since I was about 8.
Wow.
My mother told me. It's been something that, that phase that we go through where you say, it's not fair. I kind of never really grew beyond that stage. And so fairness has always been really important to me. And I worked in a variety of different sectors until I came into the kind of diversity and inclusion sector. And when I came into diversity and inclusion, for me, it was very much about race and about gender. I didn't really think very much about disability. And I think that's actually still the case a lot, even today, when we talk about diversity, the focus isn't on disability, it's on other characteristics. And so I did a lot of work on diversity and inclusion, or equal opportunities as we called it back then. I'm very old, we're going back to the 80s and 90s. And then, so I talked about disability to employers, and they would talk about, why would we want to employ disabled people? We want good people. And then disabled people would say to me, but we are good. And it's just that we're not, and all the rest of it. And then, it was something I felt quite strongly about, but didn't have lived experience of. My mother was very severely disabled, but she was retired. So disability and employment was not something I'd had lived experience of, although I had spoken to a lot of disabled people in and out of work. And then I became disabled. So I'm one of the 87% or 83%, whatever it is, of disabled people who become disabled as adults. So I was 44, I developed a spinal condition, which, long story short, I've had a number of spinal surgeries in my neck and my lower spine, and I've been left disabled. And so it's interesting, I am now one of those people I used to talk about. And I do learn that living through an experience is very different from, pontificating about it when you haven't been in that setting. So then that whole thing of employers not wanting to employ disabled people having so many talents but not having the opportunity to use them, it suddenly became much more up close and personal. And so rather than thinking, oh, somebody ought to do something about that, it kind of, nobody's doing anything about that, maybe I should. And so that's really where Evenbreak was born. And funnily enough, the premise on which it was born has been validated again more recently. We did some research a couple of years ago. Well, we had a university to do some research on our behalf, asking disabled people what the biggest barriers were that they found when they were looking for work. And by far the biggest barrier was, we don't know which employers we can trust. Every employer says we are an equal opportunities employer, but actually disabled people know that most aren't when it comes to disability. So why would you keep knocking your head against the same brick wall time after time, when as soon as an employer or a recruiter finds out that you're disabled, you're immediately rejected? Exactly. And so you need to know which employers are genuinely serious about this. And of course, having a job board demonstrates that. So if an employer is paying specifically to target disabled people to attract their talent, that's a really powerful message that says, we're not just saying this, we really mean this. And that's really why Evenbreak was born. But it was kind of driven by my lived experience and the frustration that disability wasn't really getting a look in when it came to diversity and inclusion or recruitment and employment.
And of course, you could say able-bodied people, we have things that we're probably not capable of doing. A disabled person still has an umpteen skill sets and experiences that they can bring to an employer. And even just as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking it's actually quite bonkers that anyone would be disregarded because of a disability.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's related to the job they're doing. I mean, so all of the Evenbreak team are disabled. There's 17 of us now, so we're still small, but within that 17, we have a whole range of different impairments, from mental health to neurodiversity to sensory impairment, and what we know is that a blind person isn't going to apply for a job as a taxi driver. It's not going to happen. They're not going to apply for it. In the same way that I wouldn't apply for a job as a Russian translator because I don't speak Russian.
Absolutely.
But I shouldn't be discriminated from other jobs that don't need me to be a Russian speaker because I don't speak Russian, any more than a blind person should be discriminated against for doing a job that doesn't require sight. It as you say, it's bonkers. What we should be doing is recruiting people for the skills that they have, which are relevant for the job they're applying for.
Yeah, and I think the reason that this has become such a huge education area for recruitment people, particularly, which obviously is our audience on the Recruited Recruitment podcast, is that every market is talent short now, and so we all have to think much more creatively. We have to think about the bigger picture of, if we're looking at advising our clients, and obviously my clients and you listening, you're a recruitment business, you're educating your customers, we're going to have to think much more creatively. And actually, it's almost irrelevant of what somebody's physical or mental capabilities are if they have the skills that you're looking for. You know, we look at neurodiversity. You know, these are things that we would never have been talking about sort of 5-10 years ago, but the world has definitely, I think, shifted in a very positive way. And it is down to, you know, job boards like yours and people like you that's educating. So bearing in mind our audience, which is recruiters, what can they do to ensure their customers, i.e., you know, hiring employers, are being truly inclusive during a recruitment process?
I mean, there's so many things, and we could talk about this forever, couldn't we? But I think the most important thing is to change the narrative around disability. I have spoken to so many recruiters that make assumptions about what disabled people can and can't do. And the assumption often is that disabled people will be looking for low status jobs, jobs that don't require qualifications, jobs that don't require work experience, you know, very, very entry-level jobs. And there will be disabled people who are looking for that kind of job, like there are non-disabled people who are looking for that. But actually, certainly at Evenbreak, what we find is, and I think the main thing that drives us to continue doing what we're doing is the absolute waste of talent that there is out there. So if I tell you that of our candidates, between 60 and 70% have at least one degree, which is way over and above the general population. You know, I don't know what the general population is, but you know, and many of our candidates are people with, you know, PhDs in the most obscure subjects that I have no idea about. I can't even understand the title, let alone what their skill sets are. But they aren't working because of something that's completely irrelevant. So, for example, I'm thinking of individual candidates that we have. Someone who knows more about data science than probably anybody else on the planet, you know, who has lectured people at Harvard University about groundbreaking big data stuff, doesn't have a job because he lives in Cornwall and has cerebral palsy. What either of those have to do with the immense value he could bring to a company that needs data science? And so it's that kind of, it's changing the whole narrative so that recruiters don't think, oh, we're recruiting for a logistics warehouse that needs someone to unpack boxes in the warehouse. Yes, attract disabled talent to do that, but don't assume that that's the only job that's suitable for disabled people, because it's, you know, disabled people have the same diversity of interests and qualities and talents and qualifications as the rest of the population, plus some more. So I mentioned the social model of disability, which means that every disabled person by definition faces barriers to the workplace that other candidates don't. And what that means is that we develop additional skills. So we develop creativity, we develop problem solving, we develop project management skills, which are really useful to employers. So when we talk to recruiters about disabled candidates, we're not saying this is a pity hire, give these poor people an opportunity. What we're saying is these are premium candidates who have the same diversity of qualities as all of your other candidates, plus a few more. So we're talking about premium candidates. So that's the first one. And then I think the second one, once we've got that mindset about this is about talent, not pity, is then about making sure that any of those barriers that might exist in the recruitment process are either reduced or eliminated, or something else is put in place. You know, so if it's all online, are there alternatives? Or if you're just relying on CVs, that's a bit old-fashioned these days. Should we be looking at potential rather than privilege? Because that's really all a CV tells you. So I think it's about looking at the recruitment process from the very start, from the identification of a vacancy and the job design. You know, does it have to be done 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in an office, or can it be done part-time? Can it be done remotely? Can it be done using different skills? Can it be done part-time? All of those things, right through to onboarding and everything in between, to make sure that we remove any potential barriers so that we don't exclude this amazing talent that's out there.
Absolutely. And actually that leads on very nicely to something that we obviously have talked about off camera, which is how the world has now shifted and changed. And we're now, most people in most jobs have some element of hybrid. How has the sort of new way of working, so hybrid, the fact that we all use technology, we're doing this now through Zoom, how has that impacted the disabled community, both from a positive and potentially negative point of view that recruiters need to consider?
It is definitely a mixed blessing. I mean, I think it's a blessing more than anything else. And I mean, the pandemic has been horrific, but I do think that there are some silver linings, and we have to grasp any silver lining we can find with a disaster like COVID. But what it has proved beyond any doubt is that many jobs can be done as effectively from home, if not more so.
Yep.
And I think, a lot of the fears that employers had about people working from home, which was they'll be skiving, if we can't see what they're doing, they'll be watching daytime telly, they'll be on the golf course. Yeah. Actually, the concerns are the opposite. The concerns are we need to make sure that people are taking proper breaks, that they do stop working, they don't, because that boundary blurred, isn't it, between work and home, that people don't just keep working because there hasn't been that commute that breaks the cycle. So it's been good in that it does mean that, the data scientist I just mentioned and many people like him will be able to do work from home, which means they don't have to relocate, they don't have to navigate inaccessible transport or inaccessible buildings. So it opens up the workplace for a lot more people, and it opens up for employers and recruiters a lot more talent. Danger is that we think, oh, this is good, so now all the non-disabled people can work in the office and all the disabled people can work from home. Because actually we know, don't we, through the pandemic, that lots of non-disabled people have said, hey, I quite like this. I quite like this, not having to do a 2-hour commute every day, and and spending more time with family or whatever it might be. I'd actually not want to go back to 5 days a week in the office. I'd like this hybrid arrangement. And there are lots of disabled people who say, actually, I really miss being in the office and all of that social contact. So for me, the hybrid model should open up opportunities for everybody, not just around disability, but people with caring responsibilities, or children, or people who are doing outside training, whether it's open university degrees or whatever, or people who have hobbies that might impact on their time. So actually offering a more flexible way of working, whether it's from home or remotely, or a hybrid, or flexible hours, so it doesn't have to be 40 hours 9 to 5, it can be done at different times of the day. That actually opens up the talent pool to so much more talent than has ever been available before, and also makes existing and potential people far more productive because they're working under the conditions that work well for them. So I think we should be embracing the new way of working, which is about, there's much more than one way of working. It isn't all about 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in a location. We should be embracing that for everybody and making sure that the lessons we've learned around accessibility are embedded in the new way of working. It's ironic because, of course, disabled people have been saying for decades, can I do this job from home? No, can't be done. Not possible.
And it can't
possibly be done. And yet now, oh yeah, actually it can be done. And maybe sometimes it's better doing it that way.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, you talk about effectively their positive discrimination. Why hasn't it been something that you've had, as an inclusive mindset and policy? And like you say, it's taken a pandemic for the sort of broader world to see that actually a lot of roles can be done with, whether it's hybrid, flexible. There's so many different, like you said, there's so many ways to skin a cat. So I think it's been hugely advantageous for everybody. But I think just thinking about some of the points you picked up on there, which is, we are in talent short markets. This is the biggest headache anyone's going to face in recruitment for the next decade. There's not enough talent coming through. So you have to broaden out your horizons, and you're hiring somebody that has the skills, and you embrace what that person brings, regardless, but to actually have a positive and proactive approach to hiring people with disabilities, that you will then have a cascade effect. People will then be attracted to you.
Yeah, and I question the skill shortage a little bit, because I think the skills are out there. It's just that we're not finding and attracting them. So You know, I hear on the one hand employers saying, well, we need people to, you know, AI is a big thing now, and, you know, new emerging technology, and we haven't got the talent. We have got the talent, we're just not accessing it.
Not accessing it. Wow, well, there you go. You've heard it here first. I agree with you. I think it's about finding the hidden talent pools then. Let's change it that way. So, I mean, everything that you've said, I mean, like you say, you're so refreshing. You're clearly somebody, you know, you are an expert. You were an expert before you went through your own personal lived experience of it. And you are clearly transforming the lives of, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of people every year. So if we were to all take something away today, what can each individual listener do today to raise up somebody that has got a disability to ensure that they fulfill their potential, which ultimately is what we're here to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing is, you know, a lot of recruiters will assume if someone wants the job, they'll apply for it. Actually, because people have had a whole history of discrimination, you can't just say, here's a job, apply for it if you want it. You have to work harder to attract people who traditionally probably haven't even bothered applying for that job because they know they haven't got a hope anyway. And actually, this is for me a competitive advantage. So if as a recruiter, what you are doing is making explicit to all candidates, we are inclusive, we want to see your talent, regardless of whether you're disabled or not, or what colour your skin is, or anything. Really work hard to get that message out there. We are interested in your talent. You know, so you might want to use specialist job boards. You might want to use very inclusive language in your adverts. So you're talking about, you know, we want all of our candidates to shine in this process. Tell us what you need us to do so that you can. Then people will think, oh, people like me, they are interested in. You know, use things like case studies. So, you know, disabled people working within an organisation who are thriving, you know, tell those stories. Use recruiters who are disabled to say, look, you know, at this recruitment agency, we get it. We get that talent comes in all shapes and sizes, and we want you to come to our agency. And I do believe that the recruiters who aren't doing that are really going to get left behind very, very quickly, because I think the world has changed. And I do think that employers are now demanding of recruitment partners that those recruitment partners give them diverse candidates. It's not just the same old faces, the same old names, that they are going to different markets, to different demographics, and bringing talent that they need that might look different from the talent they've had before. And if you can't do that as an agency, you might struggle to survive in the new world.
Definitely. Well, I think there's not going to be one person listening to this that isn't going to stop and think about what you just said and make sure they do that today. And if everybody does it once a day and just stops and thinks, what am I doing today to really raise people up who, you know, where we can all be more inclusive, I think it's just, I'd be very shocked. But, you know, that's all been really insightful. And I think what you do is absolutely remarkable. And thank you for all the work that you do in the broader community as well, Jane. You are a really inspiring leader yourself. And thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much indeed.
Wonderful.